Hey guys, it's Lisa and welcome to my channel. Today we're going to make over a few items, and this one is truly trash to treasure. As you can see, it's a mess. So someone had maybe started painting it and tried to repair the top. Structurally it's good, but it definitely needs some character. So my go-to when furniture needs some character is clay molds. So this one, I can't remember what the name of it is, but I will link it in my description. My plan was here to use the larger center one in the center of the top, but turns out there wasn't room for that. So I just put it aside and to use on another item, but I am going to use the two molds on the sides. So because I usually have someone ask, I'm using DAS clay. For me, it is a better value considering it is a little cheaper than the IOD clay, and I don't think it cracks as easily for me. So this is what I usually use, and I order this from Amazon. And I'm also using a trim mold, and this was gifted to me by my sister. I know she ordered it from Amazon, but I don't really know what the name of it is. But any trim mold will work. I'm just picking one that will fit well in the area that I'm going to be using it. And I'm sorry about my voice echoing somewhat. This is the first time actually that I've been able to use my studio to try to get my editing and voiceover done. And this is really going to help me to not get so behind on my videos. Because I can do it when I have some help at work. I can just do that and then not have to spend so many of my evenings away from my family editing. So this is really, I feel like going to be a good thing to have this room. But until I get it really stocked and finished, there is going to be somewhat of an echo, and it's just something that I'm going to have to live with. But like I said, as I add more to it, and obviously I need the time for that, but when I add more to it, then it will get less and less of an echo. So now I am applying some Titebond down the sides of this because, like I said, I feel like it really needs some character, and this is where I'm going to use that thin trim. And so I just spread it out very evenly so that I make sure that my edges get really good contact. And then I'm just going to start applying my trim and until I get the sides covered. And then I'm going to add my other two molds to the top. And like I said, I'll just kind of glue those to each corner. And then this will add a lot more character to this piece. Now, I did mention that I like to add my molds when they're still wet because I feel like it gets better contact. And then honestly, after a half hour or so, you can actually even paint them. And then obviously you want them to dry well before you do any kind of wax or any of that. But like I said, you can paint it almost immediately. I think the main thing is that your glue gets good contact before you start brushing your paint on. And I'm also going to go ahead and apologize for an occasional background noise because we are near a train and there are bobcats on our property that are loading customers, so occasionally we'll hear that, but I'm going to try to keep as much of that out as possible. Now, because this piece is such a mess and I can tell that there's some bleeding on the bottom, I'm going to give this a good coat of a polyurethane, and I'm just using I think this might be a satin finish here, but it really doesn't matter what finish because we're going to be covering it up anyway. But I give this a good coat inside and out with this polyurethane, and then once that dries, I can paint it. Like I said, if I didn't add something to this one, I do know that I would get some bleed through, and as it turns out, I got some bleed through on that bottom, and I'm not real sure why, because I didn't see any blue in that, but for some reason I got a little bit of blue bleed through even after coating it like this. So after I got my first coat on and saw that I was going to get some bleed through, then I put another coat of polyurethane on that bottom shelf, and still, even after all that, I got a little bit. So I have no idea what was on that shelf, but thankfully this is one that I'm going to be using in my studio. It's just, I'm trying to add, I wanted to keep it more minimal, but I'm trying to add a little more furniture, and because of the echo. So this is one, I had an area that this fit perfectly in, so I don't mind that there's going to be a little bit of that bleed through on the bottom shelf because I'll be putting items on that anyway. So once I got that covered and let it dry well, now I'm going to be adding 2 coats of the color Buttercream, and I'm doing that on the inside and out. And it did take 2 full coats to cover this. And like I said, even a 3rd coat on that bottom shelf. And I am using a furniture brush here. This one's a Dixie Belle furniture brush. But these round brushes do so well when it comes to furniture, and especially when you have spindles and legs and things like that. But any brand that I've tried works well, so you don't have to just get Dixie Belle. You can go to Lowe's or Home Depot and just get whatever you can find. So once, I forgot to mention that once I got that coat of Buttercream on here, I changed my mind on the color for this one. So I ended up using Sandbar. And the reason that I did that is because I wanted to put some white wax on these molds, and I wanted it to show up. So if I had left that Buttercream on there, you wouldn't have really noticed it. So that's why this is a little darker here. And like I said, I finished it off with some white wax. And before I start this little galvanized piece, I was asked to show the difference in some of these whites. So as you can see here, there is the cotton, and it's almost like the white. I have this on white poster board, and then there's the fluff and the Buttercream and the drop cloth. So there's your differences in those whites, and if anyone would like to see any more of them compared, I'll do that. But this was the Buttercream and cotton and drop cloth is what she wanted to see the difference in, so I just added the fluff there. So I have a couple of these little caddies that I'm going to be using in my studio, and I don't want this galvanized. It had its time, but I feel like it's not anymore, so I'm going to be giving these 2 coats of the color Buttercream. So after I get 2 coats on this and let it dry well, then I'm just taking a damp cloth and doing my distress with that, because it wouldn't be a good idea to sand this piece, because you would sand into that metal too much, into a shiny finish. And as it is, that galvanized is just dark enough to show up. But like I said, I wouldn't use this sandpaper on this. But now if you let your paint dry too long, it's a lot harder to do this. But I just let it dry a little bit longer than drying to the touch, and then I didn't have any problem with this. And after I got the distress that I wanted on this, then I just took some clear matte spray paint and gave this a good coat to seal this in. But first, I'm going to put a stencil on this. So I could have done this before I did the stencil, but then my stencil wouldn't be sealed. So like I said, I just went ahead with my stencil before I did my clear coat. And the stencil that I'm using on this one is a large furniture stencil, and I'm just going to use this one line from it, and I'm going to stencil this in Vintage Duck Egg, which is a Dixie Belle color, because I'm going to be using this in my studio, and I have some blue in there. So I'll do that, and then I like this little curvy line that's underneath this, and I'm just going to stencil that with a makeup brush and some black ink. And then I'm going to use a line from another furniture stencil and do that also in the Vintage Duck Egg. And although these large furniture stencils are very limited to large items, this is a way to use them on smaller items. Just use little bits and pieces from them. And this particular one could be used just for your numbers, because these are a good size number to use on Crocs and things like that. So I've already painted 2 of these little caddies, and I'm going to do some stenciling on the other one as well. So again, I'm just going to use a couple of lines and use the same black and blue. Now I've had both of these stencils for a while. This one was gifted to me by my friend Paula. And I know she got it from, or I'm pretty sure she got it from Amazon, but I'll try to look that up. And then the little clock stencil, I'll also try to look that up. I can't make any promises, but because like I said, I have had them a while, but I will try to add those in the description if I can. And the good thing about these little caddies is they can go on the wall or they can just sit. So I'll use one probably on my shelf and one on the wall. And then I thrifted this little picture, and I love the rose, and I love the color in the background, which is going to work perfectly for my room. I had a little area that I felt like I needed it, but I didn't want this frame. So, or I didn't want this color on the frame. So I'm painting this with 2 coats of the color Buttercream, and I'll let that dry well, and then I'm just going to do some wet distressing. I'll just use the wet washcloth like I did on the other one, and just kind of wipe some of the raised edges until I get the distress that I want. And then I'm going to finish this one off with some clear wax, and that's honestly all I had to do to this one. And I didn't even bother taping this off because it's very easy just to take a razor blade and just scrape that right off, especially if you don't let the paint cure too long. But I just love this color of blue in the background, and I think it's going to work really well in my little area that I needed it. And this frame, although it is gold, it's dark enough that it'll be a good distress color when I go to wipe that back. And here I have that distressed already, and now I'm just adding some clear wax. And I just really like the look that this Buttercream had on this picture. I just feel like the gold just didn't do it any justice. And then I thrifted a little wicker wastebasket, and didn't really know what I wanted to do with it at the time, but I needed a little wastebasket in my studio, so I'm just going to paint it to go in there. So I'm going to give this 1 coat of the colored Vintage Duck Egg, and I'm going to use a furniture brush here because, as most of you know, painting wicker is not the easiest, so these get down into the grooves better, I feel like. So I'm only doing 1 coat because, for one thing, it covered pretty well. There's still, there'll be some little areas down inside the wicker that you'll see somewhat of the white left, but I don't mind that because I'm going to be going over this when it's dry with some white wax. So that white will settle down into a lot of the creases anyway, so you won't see that you've missed anything. And I just like the color that, the effect that the white wax has on this color. So it'll tone it down somewhat, but it'll give it some more dimension, and I just really like the look that I got. And not only will this white wax change up the color a little bit and add some dimension, it also is going to help protect that chalk paint as well. And some people might even put a clear coat over this, but most of the time when I use a wax, I don't bother to seal it because I feel like that's enough. Chalk paint, if you let it sit long enough anyway, it will almost seal itself. But you'll have that chalky texture that won't go away, and it will accept stains. But this will keep that from happening, and I like the look of white wax. I probably overuse it, and when I first discovered it, I know that I overused it. But it really is fun to use and see the effect that it has, especially when there's some detail that wax can settle down into. So now I'm just going to play some music while I show you through my vignette. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I hope to see you in the next. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great evening, and God bless you and your family.